Welcome to iBlockchain channel. This video sponsored by 0xfactory.com. 0xfactory.com will help you to create your own token and smart contracts without coding. Also, you can create ICO Launchpad dApp, Airdrop dApp, decentralized exchange, and download full source code, private, internal, external and public keywords in Solidity. In Solidity, there are 4 access modifiers that can be used to specify the visibility of functions and state variables in a contract: private, internal, external, and public. Here's a brief overview of each modifier. Private. Functions and state variables marked as private can only be accessed within the current contract. They are not visible to any other contracts or to external accounts. The private modifier is typically used for helper functions or variables that are only needed internally within the contract. Internal. Functions and state variables marked as internal can only be accessed within the current contract and any contracts that inherit from it. They are not visible to external accounts or contracts that do not inherit from the current contract. The internal modifier is typically used for functions and variables that need to be accessed by other contracts that inherit from the current contract. External. Functions marked as external can only be called from outside the contract, i.e., by other contracts or externally owned accounts, EOAs. They cannot be called from within the contract or by other functions in the same contract. The external modifier is typically used for functions that are intended to be called by other contracts or external accounts, as it reduces the gas cost of the transaction and enforces a clear separation of concerns. Public. Functions and state variables marked as public can be accessed from anywhere, both within and outside the contract. This means that other functions within the contract can also call the public function, and it can be called by external accounts and contracts. The public modifier is typically used for functions and variables that need to be accessed from outside the contract or by other contracts that inherit from the current contract. It's worth noting that the default visibility for state variables and functions in Solidity is internal, so if you don't specify an access modifier, the variable or function will be internal. Here's an example to illustrate the use of these access modifiers. In this example, my private var can only be accessed within the current contract, my internal var can be accessed within the current contract and any contracts that inherit from it, and my public var can be accessed from anywhere. The setVars function is marked as public, so it can be called from outside the contract, and it sets the values of all 3 state variables. The getPrivateVar function is marked as private, so it can only be called within the current contract, and it returns the value of my private var. The getInternalVar function is marked as internal, so it can be called within the current contract and any contracts that inherit from it, and it returns the value of my internal var. The getPublicVar function is marked as public, so it can be called from anywhere, and it returns the value of my public var.